Good morning, everyone. The Labor, Industry, and Veterans Military Affairs Finance and Policy Committee will come to order. I would like to announce that this meeting will take place in accordance with House Rule 10.01. This meeting may be viewed on House Public Information TV, which is available on the House website. As is custom with this committee, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, to the
nation under
God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Ms. Doyle, will you please take the roll?
Chair Ecklund.
Present.
Vice Chair Zhang.
Present.
Representative Detmer.
Detmer present.
Representative McDonald. Representative McDonald, present.
Present.
Representative Berg.
Present.
Representative Bliss.
present.
Representative Edelson.
Present.
Representative Frederick.
Present.
Representative Greenman.
Present.
Representative Nelson.
Present.
Representative Poston.
Present.
Representative Raleigh.
Raleigh present.
Representative Sundin.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Quorum is present. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes from March 24th, 2021. Every member should have received a copy of today's minutes in their inbox. Representative Zhang, what's your pleasure?
So moved.
Representative Zhang moves the approval of minutes from March 24th, 2021. Any comments or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor of the adoption of the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. The minutes are adopted. Now I'll hand the gavel off to Vice Chair Zhang.
Thank you so much for hearing.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm still holding up.
Members, I know some of you heard this bill on Tuesday, so you're familiar with it, but for others, I just wanted to.
Chair Zhang, I don't know if we're having audio problems or, oh, there you are,
There
okay.
you go.
All right.
Good morning. Next on the agenda item, Representative Ecklund. Our only bill for the agenda today is House File 752 from Representative Ecklund. Would you like to move your bill?
Thank you, Chair Zhang. I move that House File 752 be re-referred to Ways and Means.
Representative Ecklund moves that House File 752 be re-referred to Ways and Means. I will move the DE3 amendment for House File 752. We had the overview for this amendment on Wednesday. Representative Ecklund, any further explanation you'd like to provide today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we need any further explanation. We do have House staff here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, and then looks like we have two amendments to the DE3. First, we would take the author's amendment, the A3 from Representative Ecklund. Would you like to move adoption of your amendment and explain?
I'll move the A3 amendment, Mr. Chair, and this just cleans up some language that resulted for the guard part of the House File 752, and Mr. Kerr is here to explain that if people have any questions.
All right, any questions or comments on the amendment from members? Representative Detmer? Oh, Representative Detmer, I think you're still muted.
It is early. It is early in the morning, but if Mr. Kerr would just give us a brief explanation.
Representative Ecklund?
Chair Zhang, Mr. Kerr from the Guard will make the explanation.
All right, Mr. Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Don Kerr. I'm the Executive Director of the Department of Military Affairs, for the record. And thank you for the question, Representative Detmer. Yeah, we had some outreach from the Minnesota Newspapermen's Association, our newspaper association, and they had some concerns with a couple of the data practices portions of the bill. And so we just removed those two sections in the interest of clarity. They had some valid concerns with regard to some of the language we were using. We think we can tighten that language up and potentially reintroduce those bills at some point in the future, or those provisions at some point in the future. But for now, in deference to them and to make the passage of the bill a little bit easier, we just decided to delete those two sections. The other amendment there was the technical error that was made in the original drafting of the bill. The total numbers were correct, but there was 1 year that was improperly annotated, and that number gets corrected in this amendment. And that pretty much wraps it up, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kerr. Representative Detmer, follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Kerr. So it was more of a technical changes that you had to make. Is that it?
Mr. Kerr?
Mr. Chair, Representative Detmer, no, we had two provisions in there that we felt clarified the Data Practices Act with regard to the classification of private information for service members on state active duty. It was pointed out to us that the language we used was pretty much overly broad, and the information we were trying to protect is probably already protected inside statute anyway. The second section that we deleted had to do with, we believe we were basically articulating the agency's position that typically when we get data requests, we feel the Minnesota Data Practices Act does not apply because of the general federal nature of the enterprise. So whenever questions pertain to the National Guard component, not the Department of Military Affairs, but members of the National Guard, actions of the National Guard, we feel that that's governed under the Privacy Act on the federal level, and that the classification of data and the information should be dealt with in that fashion. That remains our position. Our intent was to get that put into law because we believe that would save us a lawsuit at some point in the future if someone were to challenge that. But it really doesn't change the way we operate, so we were willing to remove the language, again, in order to keep the bill moving without any controversy.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Representative Detmer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Kerr. Was that policy then? There was no fiscal part of that?
Mr. Kerr?
Mr. Chair and Representative, that's correct. There's no fiscal impact. It's all policy.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Detmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Any more comments or questions for the A3? All those in favor of adopting the A3 say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries and the amendment is adopted. Looks like next we have the A2 from Representative Detmer. Would you move your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the A2 amendment.
Okay. Members, any comments or questions for the A2?
And Mr. Chair, maybe I should explain a little bit.
Representative Detmer?
Yeah, A2 amendment is a friendly amendment. I already talked to the chair, Ecklund, and also the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Commander's Task Force, which consists of congressional chartered veterans organizations here in Minnesota. There's 9 of them. And if you look at the bill, there's 7 that receive funds. And the last time that these veterans organizations like the Disabled American Veterans, which is the DAV, Military Order, Purple Heart, American Legion, VFW, Vietnam Veterans of America, AMVETS, Paralyzed Veterans of America. They do a lot for our veterans of the state. And the last time that they received an increase in their funding was back in, I believe, 2009. So we've just felt, I know they've been asking for some increase in funding. So that's what that does. It's $147,000 increase for each year of the biennium. So that brings them up to $500,000 a year or $1 million for the biennium. And the department, as I mentioned, is good with this. So I hope that the committee sees this as a good amendment for this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Detmer. Any further questions from members for the A2? All those in favor of adopting the A2 amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries and the amendment is adopted. Any questions or comments to the bill as amended? Representative Ecklund, any further comments for the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I talked this over with Representative Detmer earlier this morning, as well as Mr. Reese talked it over with Mr. Hallquist. I understand that this next thing is going to be controversial, but I have been open and honest with the committee from day one in this. I'm going to add an oral amendment to add House File 792 to the bill and fund that at $50,000 per year and take the money from the General War on Terror Task Force. I will take the responsibility for not having this bill in our original omnibus bill, and Representative Winkler is the chief author, and as majority leader, he didn't see that the bill wasn't in there to get the amendment ready. Utter lack of communication between the majority Winkler's and my offices. So I know this puts the committee in an awkward position, but I will move that as an oral amendment, Mr. Chair. And I did see, Mr. Chair, I did see that Mr. Diebel didn't maybe get the amendment drafted. It may be in everybody's email boxes now, but I again apologize for the committee for doing this, Mr. Chair. So I'll move House File 792 at $50,000 per year to add to House File, or 792 to add to House File 752.
All right, Representative Ecklund moves his oral amendment to add to House File 752. We'll go to questions and comments from members. I think Representative McDonald had his hand up first. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Ecklund. I appreciate your explanation. However, I respectfully believe that this is not appropriate within the 24-hour rule. It's the second time now. I do understand, and I completely believe that you are sincere in your asking for forgiveness and that this is not appropriate. And I would vote against it. Of course, I'll probably lose. But we haven't done this yet in our committee as in the minority. And you said you would give us some leeway if that was the case, but sometimes 2 strikes you're out, right? But I just don't think it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, that this late hour on an omnibus bill that Representative Winkler would bring this forward and ask you to bring it on. It's against the rules, and at some point we just have to say no and follow the rules. And you are an admirable man. I know you are. Whether or not you accept this or not, I think that in the end, the right thing to do would be to not accept this and follow the rules of your committee and the Minnesota House of Representatives set forth. That's all I have to say about that, Mr. Chairman and Representative Ecklund. I hope that you'll do the right thing, and the rest of your committee will do the right thing and deny the motion of the amendment at this late hour and follow the rules. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Representative Detmer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, Chair Ecklund, he did call me and explain the situation. I guess I'm not disappointed in the chair, but I am disappointed in Majority Leader Winkler. He should know better than to try to put something in at the last minute where we do have a policy within our committee, and we try to do the right things for veterans and their families. And I've heard House File 792 a couple times. Last year, they came to the MAG meeting and very disorganized. And also, when Winkler came to this committee, Majority Leader Winkler had some testifiers and very disorganized. And I think the part of the department is neutral on this, but knowing that the Department of Veterans Affairs can pretty much handle this on their own without putting another, $100,000. We're talking $100,000 here to an organization where it could be handled right within the department. Is the department here that can maybe make some comments?
Department of Veterans Affairs. Do we have anybody else from the Department of Veterans Affairs with us?
I see Ben Johnson there. I didn't
Mr.
want to put you
Johnson?
on, I didn't want to put you on the spot, Mr. Johnson, but you're on the spot. You know how I feel about this legislation, and in the last minute of trying to put something in and taking money from the bill that the chair and the committee has put together with the trust that we were doing the right thing for our veterans. But you know, by the way, I like a roll call on this too, because I'm pretty upset about this. It should not be something that we should be dealing with at this time. And I've already told the chair, Ecklund, how I felt. So, Mr. Johnson.
All right. Thank you, Representative Detmer. We'll finish the questions first. Mr. Johnson.
Chair Zhang, Representative Detmer, members of the committee. I won't comment on the rule or the amendment portion of it. I will say that we have had multiple conversations with the Veterans Resilience Project and certainly understand the value of the programming that they're proposing. I have communicated to them all along that our biggest concern would be that funding for their program would take away from initiatives that we have had vetted and prepared over the course of the last 15 months, which is the case here. So it's at the committee's discretion. Obviously, we would be disappointed to lose 20% of the funding for the 9/11 and Global War on Terrorism Task Force, but I certainly understand the position that Chair Ecklund is in.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Representative Detmer.
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I think I guess Chair Ecklund could say that we're supporting him to go ahead with the bill that we put together, trusting both sides of the aisle here that we've got a good bill to go forward with, funding the things that need to be funded. I mean, we even had the Bliss, Representative Bliss, the Camp Bliss bill, where both Ecklund and I put amendments on for our veterans organizations, the Disabled Vets Camp, and Chair Ecklund had some program that he wanted to support too, but he kept that out because we didn't want to take money from other areas of the bill. So again, I'm disappointed in Majority Leader that he would put us in this position, and that's why I'm calling for a roll call. I see there's other people have their hands up also. Thank you.
All right. We will move to Representative Rowley. I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just if I could, Chair, somebody's got their microphone on, and I can hear testifying in the background, and I'm not. It's pretty distracting. I'd ask the Chair to remind members to put their microphones on mute.
Remind members to put your other phone. Representative Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. I want to echo what Representative Detmer just said. Earlier this week, I asked for clarification on why particular amendments or particular initiatives were taken off of this bill. And I was told that it was because of budgetary constraints, and that's just the way that it is. Totally understand it. I'm learning the process as well. What I don't understand about this amendment, and where my question really lies, is Chair Ecklund said that this would appropriate $50,000 that would be taken out of the 9/11 funding, and I'm not going to get the funding correct. And I apologize, Chair, because literally we just got this a few minutes into this particular meeting. I was made aware of it. But can you explain why the bill is at, I believe it's funded at $500,000. Now it says it's going to be at $400,000, but we're appropriating $50,000 over or $50,000 a year over the biennium for $100,000, which sounds like an increase to me, but the paperwork shows $100,000 decrease. And honestly, I'm completely confused.
All right, thank you, Representative Rowley. Representative Ecklund, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Rowley, It should stay budget neutral. We're taking $100,000 from the Greater War on Terror Task Force and moving it into for this Veterans Resiliency Project. I'd like to remind the members, I raised my hand, but I figured I didn't have to since I'm testifying at some point. I'd get to talk again anyway. I want to remind the members that right now the Senate companion bill to this bill has $112,000 in it for the Greater War on Terror. So we're certainly, when we get to conference, we're certainly going to have some discussions on our differences in the funding of these two bills.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Representative Raleigh?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. Chair Ecklund, again, I apologize. I don't understand the mechanisms of this. So as we're looking at the bill itself, I believe it's 472 from Representative Winkler. What is the ask and what's the difference on what's being presented today versus what we're seeing in 472?
Representative Ecklund?
Thank you, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair.
792. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Raleigh. House File 792 asked for $400,000 for each year of the biennium. That obviously was money that was not available to us with the targets that we got. And so I elected, like I said, I'll take the hit on this. I elected to drop the General War on Terror request from 500,000 to 400,000, knowing that we're going into negotiations with the Senate and their number is vastly lower, and to take $100,000 from that and split it up to $50,000 in each year of the biennium to the House File 792, which is the Veterans Resiliency Bill.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Representative Raleigh, follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So does that mean that 792 will now be at 50,000? And again, I'm not understanding what the request is. So I apologize. Does that mean 792 will be reduced down to $100,000 over the biennium?
Representative Ecklund?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Representative Raleigh, that is correct.
Representative Raleigh, any follow-up?
Yes, Chair. So if I understand it, I want to make sure that I'm stating it correctly. So that means 792 will go from 400,000 per year or $800,000 in the biennium down to $100,000 over the biennium, reducing it down to $50,000 a year. And if that's the case, then I'd like to hear from whomever can testify. Is the $50,000 per year, when we saw their budget numbers previously, are they even going to be able to do anything with that, Mr. Chair?
Representative Ecklund?
Representative Raleigh, I don't know if anybody's here from that project. When I chatted with Majority Leader Winkler, he thought that they would be able to get their project started at that cost, and that's the number that we talked about.
All right, do we have anybody that can testify to that? I don't see any hand raised.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Ecklund?
If I could ask to Representative Raleigh, if we can get that comments to him offline from the Veterans Resiliency Project or Representative Majority Winkler's office.
All right, thank you, Representative Ecklund. We will get that to Representative Raleigh. We'll go on to our next person on the list. Representative Edelson?
Thank you. Again, my hand raise function is not working, so I apologize. I'm having to text people. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, Chair Ecklund, this is a good amendment. I see that Senator Housley is on this bill in the Senate. I'm a therapist. We don't talk often about our careers here, but my background is a clinical therapist. And EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is a therapy that, I mean, honestly, that this is addressing, and people that have gone through PTSD or are currently undergoing therapy have tried multiple different therapies. before they come to EMDR. So I want to remind people what we're actually talking about here is about the therapy and it expanding. It's not something that is new. It's a type of psychotherapy that's been around for years. And I support this. So thank you, Chair Ecklund.
Thank you, Representative Edelson. Next on the list is Representative Poston.
Thank you, Chair John. Chair Ecklund, I'm a little bit confused. I've heard a couple of different things. Can you just explain where this money is coming from? Where you're taking this money to put into this?
Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Poston. The money is coming from the appropriation for the General War on Terror Task Force. In the bill before amended was for $500,000. We moved that down to $400,000, and because I know that the Senate bill is at 112, so there's going to be negotiations at some point in time. We won't be going up, and so that's why I elected to take the money from there, and so it doesn't change anything with our target or our doesn't increase our budget. So. And then it's going to take 50 of that $100,000 from the General War on Terror Task Force appropriation. It will be $50,000 for each year of the biennium.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Any further follow-up, Representative Poston?
Well, thank you, Chair Ecklund.
All right. Next is Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I guess I'm a little disappointed to say the least. You know, Representative Winkler stands on the floor of the House and lectures us on following the rules and the importance of the rules of the House. And he comes into our committee and asks the chair to break the rules. You know, I had a bill that I was pretty passionate about myself. And when we came up with the bill, I accepted the chair's decision. I didn't like it. I thought it was a good project. You know, and we're breaking the rules to bring this in front of us again. And it just goes back to Representative Winkler, you know, standing on the House floor and lecturing us, standing up there and lecturing us. Members, we need to follow the rules. Well, I guess in Representative Winkler's case, the rules are for thee and not for me. So that really, really bothers me. It sticks with me incredibly bad. You know, when this bill was in front of us, members, it was controversial. It was controversial when we asked for reports on how the money was going to be spent and the data. I believe, if I'm correct, that the amendment that was put up was voted down. So we're taking a controversial bill, pulling it from a project that the Department of Veterans Affairs or whoever really wanted the 9/11 project funding, and according to, and Mr. Chair, I respect you and trust me, you can tell I'm angry on this, and it's not with you, but you're taking us to a lower negotiating position with the Senate now, instead of coming in at a stronger position and lowering maybe to you know, where we are now. We're starting off at a lower position, so it's lowering our negotiating position. You know, that just it's very, very frustrating. Mr. Chair, I will be voting against this. You know, again, the rules are there for a reason. It's to show how we operate, and when we don't follow the rules, what are they there for? It's just it's very disappointing, Mr. Chair. And again, I appreciate your leadership and I respect you, but this is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bliss. Next is Representative Detmer, but Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Bliss. I completely understand, but this is not the first committee that I have been involved with in my career as a legislature that the 24-hour rule has been waived. So it has happened before. I just want to bring that to everybody's attention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Next on the list, Representative Detmer. If it's okay, can I go to Representative Berg and Representative McDonald?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
As I look back to you. Representative Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can completely respect the conversation around process and rules. I can somewhat respect the fact that it feels like the majority leader is sort of, in taking some liberties or expecting something that he brings forward to be treated differently than somebody else's. I can understand the frustrations like with the personalities. I just hope with this particular piece though, that we sort of move away from being disappointed in the process, because process isn't perfect, right? We're human, we make mistakes, we forget to put something in or on the agenda or whatever. This bill is incredibly important. When we talk about taking care of our veterans and their PTSD, I mean, for those of you that are veterans on this committee, you have an understanding of this that I'll never have. Let's help our veterans. Let's admit we made a mistake with process. Let's help our veterans. As a therapist, Representative Edelson talked about the importance of this option to have it available to our veterans. Let's focus on that. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Representative Berg, for that. Representative McDonald?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make this real quick. And I understand, Representative Ecklund, the position you're in and what you did with the taking the money out and having another position within the conference bill. And I can respect that and understand that. And the process is not perfect. Absolutely. Each party does this. But just for the record, again, I'm going to go back to the rules. And I want this committee to know officially that when I stood on the House floor last week and honored a 100-year-old veteran who turned 100, who fought and was on Iwo Jima and watched both of the flags being raised and wanted to honor him, that is always acceptable and always honorable and should never be out of order, even though it's under announcements or not. So the hypocrisy for him to come in here and ask us, you chair, to break the rules and then criticize me on the House floor when I did have permission from the speaker, incidentally, to honor this 100-year-old veteran, I think is unfair. And Representative Ecklund, I hope you make that known to Representative Winkler on behalf of the veterans who have done so much for our community and our country and our state that, we'll give a little bit here, but he also has to give a little bit. And by not, by breaking the rules, it's very unfortunate. But the question is, the $500,000 that will be taken out of the 911 terrorism task force, whatever the organization's name is, the program, what exactly will it be being used for this new program, the program that you have the funding go
to? Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your comments, Representative McDonald. The money we'll be using for starting this veterans resiliency, Representative Edelson can tell what the therapy is. I'm not a doctor, but it's eye motion therapy, eye movement therapy. Like I said, I hate getting into, Representative McDonald, I hate getting into medical things and legal things because I know nothing about either one of them. And probably thank goodness to most of the people for that. But so that's what it'll be used for. And I'm asking that a report be on this will be given to both the minority and majority members of the committees and the House and Senate so that we do have a good report back on it, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Representative McDonald, any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Ecklund. I'm sure it's a very good program and it's hopefully the right thing to do. I'm sure it is, but not in this fashion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Detmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a comment, if all of us that were in committee when the Veterans Resilience Project came and testified, we tried to get information from them about what kind of outcomes they're having, and they could not provide us any data on outcomes. And I think before we start funding a program without knowing what the outcomes of their treatments are going to be, that puts up a red flag for me. And at the same point, would Mr. Johnson maybe explain to the committee how the funds are going to be used for the 9/11 anniversary and why are we doing that? I think we need to explain to the committee the importance of the 9/11. And I know I was deployed right after 9/11. I think it's important that we see what's going on, why the department is so important that we honor those that have served after 9/11. And maybe Mr. Johnson could give us an update on how that funds are going to be used.
All right, thank you. Before we go to Mr. Johnson, looks like staff has the updated amendment language that should have been emailed to everyone. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Zhang, Representative Detmer, members of the committee. The $500,000 that we have requested for the 9/11 and Global War on Terrorism Task Force was to support three particular items. Probably the most obvious one would be the remembrance ceremonies on September 11th of 2021, which is the 20-year anniversary of the attacks in New York and DC and Pennsylvania, the beginning of the 9/11 era of service. So a portion of that money will be committed to putting on I guess remembrance is the best way to describe it. I don't want to call it any sort of celebration. Just honoring the members members of the military from Minnesota and their families who have served in various areas of conflict around the world over the past 20 years. The second portion of the funding is to be used to put together basically a book that collects stories from service members and their families from Minnesota that will sort of capture and recount the sacrifices and the experiences of Minnesotans, both civilian and current and former service members. And the third large portion of it will be to collect that information for the book, but also to collect it as a traveling exhibit, working with our partners at the Minnesota Military Museum at Camp Ripley to be doing traveling education for members of Minnesotans, really to tell the story of what the past 20 years of experience has been for those of us who have served and those who supported us while we served. So those are the three basic areas that this funding would be supporting.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Representative Detmer, follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's important that we understand what we're trying to do here with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the 9/11 program that we're planning. I think I mentioned it too, that I was deployed for 20 months after 9/11. Spent time away from my family, and my twin sons, who are West Point graduates, they've both been deployed now. One has been deployed 4 times, Iraq, Afghanistan, and his twin brother's been deployed 5 times, Iraq, Afghanistan, Korea, and now Turkey. So my family has been a big part of this 9/11 program, and I really think that it'd be a disservice to those men and women who have served after 9/11 to take money and put into a program that hasn't proven itself. I really believe that as a committee, we need to keep the money where it's at. So, and Mr. Chair, I really appreciate you calling me and getting things squared away so that I had a good understanding of what was going on. But again, I am disappointed in Majority Leader Winkler. I think he should know better. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Detmer. I completely understand your concerns, and I want to apologize for Mr. Johnson for putting him on the spot. Things happened so quickly this morning that we caught the department unawares as well. But I still think to Representative Bliss's comment, maybe we are putting ourselves in a weaker bargaining position. But I certainly know that with what the Senate has put up at $112,000, we are not going to be able to accomplish all the goals that MDVA has for putting this project together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Representative Poston.
Thank you, Chair Zhang. Chair Ecklund, I don't really have a question, just a comment, and maybe you can give me some thoughts on it, and maybe you could pass this comment along. You've heard several people say they're disappointed in the majority leader. I am as well. I think if he was going to break the rules and put this amendment forward, that he should have been here with us this morning to answer these questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Representative Poston. And I have no idea what the majority leader's schedule is, Representative Poston. Sometimes I don't know what my schedule is. So, and so, but I will certainly relay that information, Representative Poston.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Looks like the roll call was requested for the.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Edelson.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand. Do you mind if I just add one thing?
Go ahead, Representative Edelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Detmer, I think you raised a good point. I think I remember during committee, they did not talk about the studies, but actually there have been numerous studies around EMDR. But I will say that when they testified, they could have been more clear about that. I can absolutely send the committee the controlled studies that will show that EMDR actually does, as a psychotherapy, does reduce symptoms for veterans. It does reduce symptoms for persons that have experienced severe PTSD. And so I will send that because I do think you raise a good point. They didn't reference that. And I think that's an important thing they should have referenced. So thank you.
And Mr. Chair,
Representative Detmer.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, at the same point, there was studies that showed the opposite, that it's not been a proven technique used with people, not just veterans, but other people too. So there's both sides of the issue there, but I appreciate Representative Edelson. And I agree, they did not do a good job in their testimony. Thank you.
All right, we will go to the roll call on the amendment.
I think Representative Raleigh.
Representative Raleigh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment to the comment on the comment. Sorry about this. In my questions, I was not questioning EMDR or the efficacy of the treatment or anything else like that. As a disabled veteran myself, I get it. I'm always looking for other things to help my sisters and brothers that served. My question is this, on the report, as it was just talked about. In the testimony that was brought forward previously, I had asked if there was any peer-reviewed journals or if the reports were going to be able to be used for peer-reviewed journals. And Mr. Chair, I was pretty much poo-pooed for even bringing that up. It was, I don't want to say that there was aspersions cast, but I was definitely told that that was not part of the process that was going to be funded here, and that I should really take a look at, journals like JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, and that it was outside of the scope of this study to do anything with peer review reports or peer review submissions. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's comments here, but we did ask this in the previous testimony. I was poo-pooed for even bringing it up, and now we're talking about the reports again. So I would just like to renew what everybody else is saying. I'm pretty disappointed we didn't get a chance to hear from the amendment's author, and I really wish we would have. But more than anything else, Chair Ecklund, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate how tough of a position that you're in. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm satisfied.
Thank you, Representative Raleigh. And so we will take the roll call on the oral amendment from Representative Ecklund as reflected in the written A5 amendment, which should also be posted online. Ms. Doyle will take the roll.
Chair Ecklund.
Yes.
Ecklund, aye. Vice Chair Zhang.
Aye.
Zhang, aye. Representative Detmer.
Nay.
Detmer, nay. Representative McDonald. Representative McDonald. Representative Berg.
Aye.
Fine, I'm sorry. Nay.
Berg, aye. McDonald, nay. Representative Bliss.
No.
Bliss, nay. Representative Edelson?
Aye.
Edelson, aye. Representative Frederick?
Aye.
Frederick, aye. Representative Greenman?
Aye.
Greenman, aye. Representative Nelson?
Aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Poston?
Nay.
Poston, nay. Representative Raleigh?
Raleigh, nay.
Raleigh, nay. Representative Sundin?
Aye.
Sundin, aye. There are 8 ayes, 5 nays.
There being 8 ayes and 5 nays, the motion carries and the oral amendment is adopted. Members, any questions or comments on the bill as amended? Seeing none, Representative McDonald. Sorry about that. Representative McDonald.
Yeah, no, sorry, I couldn't hit the button quite soon enough. Just a question, Representative Ecklund, just regarding the veterans homeless appropriations. It's obviously a very serious issue, and we want to do everything we can for that. But particularly, are some of the funds going to be able to help or go to some of the nonprofit groups that are in the trenches, if you will, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Brotherhood? I don't know if Mary's sharing and carrying hands. I don't know if they accept any federal, state money, but it's a big appropriation to handle a big project. So how many of our nonprofit groups are in the trenches that'll be able to help? That'll be us getting some of the funds.
Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative McDonald, I don't know all the nonprofits that MDVA works with. I do know that they have an encompassing plan to bring veterans homelessness to functional zero. And I think I can pass that question off to Mr. Ben Johnson from MDVA. He may have some more specifics of what their plans are, Mr. Chair and Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Mr. Johnson, putting you on the spot again.
Chair Zhang, Representative Ecklund, and Representative McDonald, yes, we 100% will be working with our network of nonprofits to run this program to the ground. The plan at this point is to develop a request for proposal that will lean heavily on those in the nonprofit and public and private sector to develop the most comprehensive plan to develop this. We will be modeling it after the HUD-VASH program. That's the Housing and Urban Development Veteran Assistive Services for Housing program at the federal level for veterans who are eligible for VA healthcare. We will be using the same model. We plan to use the same model to use this funding for both vouchers for housing and supportive services, but absolutely we'll be using our network of nonprofit providers.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Representative McDonald, any follow-up questions?
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, lastly, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Just approximately how many veterans in our state are homeless? Do you have that number?
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Zhang, Representative McDonald, I can pull up the website. We have an outstanding homepage for our homelessness program that has up to the minute numbers. The last that I saw was 285, I believe. And we know that with this program, there are at least 85 veterans who are not eligible for the HUD-VASH program, who we would be immediately in a position to assist. So, but we do have that number. I could pull it up if you like. I can pull it up and give you an exact number, or I can share the link with you as well offline.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And Representative McDonald?
Yeah, so Mr. Johnson, did you say 285? 285 veterans, correct?
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Zhang, Representative McDonald, that's the last number that I remember. I'm waiting for my homepage to load so I can give you the exact as of today.
Representative McDonald?
Actually, I have phone a friend.
Mr. Johnson.
The director has texted me and said 270 as of today, and 100% of the programming funds will go out the door to nonprofits. It will not be working with. It will not be going into the agency's budget. It will be going through the agency out the door to the nonprofits.
Thank you for that, Mr. Johnson, for the clarification. Representative McDonald?
Yeah, just do you think, Mr. Johnson, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Johnson, that for that 278, that the appropriation of over 6 million, that, I mean, is it feasible, practical to purchase homes for those? I mean, it's too big a number, right, for our veterans who sacrifice so much, but yet it's a small number, relatively speaking, to the homelessness issue. Is it feasible, doable, or even makes any sense that we would actually purchase home for each one of those individuals with the 6 million? I think it's 6,350,000 or something like close to $6.5 million. Does that make sense, or am I just off the wall here?
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Zhang, Representative McDonald, the program is not intended to purchase houses for homeless veterans. The program is for both basically rent support, so housing vouchers for rental to get people back on track, and as well as supportive services. So working with social service workers, employment and education folks. Basically, it's the full wraparound supportive services that you find in the existing HUD-VASH program. So it's not intended to purchase housing. It's intended to get people back on their feet, give them 24 months of rental assistance, and help them get on their way to not needing any additional, or not continuing to need additional support from the VA or MDVA or the state of Minnesota. We want them to get back on their feet and in a position to support themselves. That's the end goal.
Representative McDonald.
Very good, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'll go to the website and just get more familiar with it. It's a great program, and I do support that. And I appreciate your indulgences on my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you. Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make an oral amendment to the bill, please. I'd like to move HF 1229 as an oral amendment to this bill. HF 1229 funds Camp Bliss Veterans Retreat at $150,000, $75,000 per year. It also funds Veterans on the Lake at $50,000 and $128,000 for Disabled Veterans Rest Camp. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move this bill in front of the committee. This amendment.
Representative Bliss would like to make an oral amendment to House File 792. Any questions or comments to the bill as amended?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Bliss, where do you propose taking the money from for this oral amendment?
Representative Bliss.
Sorry, couldn't find my mute button. I would like to move it from the homeless veterans, please.
Any further questions or comments on the bill as amended?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ecklund.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Representative Bliss, I appreciate where you're coming from on this, but I struggled with where to move the money from when I made my oral amendment, and taking into account all the comments on the Greater War on Terror Task Force, I certainly appreciate the work that we need to do on this, but that is a task force. The Veterans Homelessness Bill is something that we see about in the media, social media, constantly, about taking care of our veterans, which I 100% agree. That's been my focus on since I've been chair of this committee, is on homelessness and suicide prevention. So, Mr. Chair, I oppose this amendment coming with the funding coming from the homelessness portion of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Ecklund. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Representative Bliss or Mr. Johnson. Would it be fair to say that the Camp Bliss, the Veterans on the Lake, and the Disabled Veterans Rest Camp helps prevent homelessness, or helps those veterans who are homeless?
Is this for Representative Bliss or Mr. Johnson?
Well, it could be both, Mr. Chair.
All right.
I can take that, Mr. Chair. That's Representative Bliss.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative McDonald. You know, yeah, when you get veterans together, part of the problem with, or a big problem with homeless veterans, this is mental illness, as we all know. But all three of these camps are serve that community with mental illness in the veterans population with PTSD. And by treating these veterans, it will certainly impact the veterans' homelessness. And to your point, Mr. Chair, I'm sure that the numbers can be knocked out in conference committee. I know the Senate has a number in their homeless appropriation as well, and I'm sure they'll fight for it, and we can come to some sort of agreement in conference committee.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Bliss. Well, just a thought, that we're rightfully so, we're funding the veterans homeless. Mr. Chair, I commend you on that. We all do. I support that. It's 6,300,000 and some thousand and change. So we could take the fund 6 million for the homeless for 2 years. That's a lot of money for 278 homeless, right? For all the services that we do. Maybe it's not. If $6 million is not a lot of money for 278 homeless, then we need to up that. But we could take the 300,000 of that, and they'll still get 6 million for the 2 years for the homelessness, and put that into Representative Bliss's bill. It's a total of approximately 300,000, which is good for the soul and the hearts and the minds of those veterans. And then the homeless program, the homeless veterans, the 6 million that you appropriated, would be for the physical. Representative Bliss is for the mental. I think it makes perfect sense, and we do apologize for bringing it in the last minute. It just occurred to us what a great idea this was to help the veterans. I know we all want to do the same thing. So I encourage you, Representative Ecklund, to at least consider that. It's not a bad idea, although it came up suddenly and slapped us in the face, just like your Representative Winkler's amendment did. Consider that, Representative Ecklund. It does make good sense to move money around to help the soul and the mind and the hearts of the veterans, and still appropriate the 6 million for the physical dwellings and the services that it entails. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Detmer, or would you like Representative Poston to go, and then you can close, or?
Well, let me just
Representative Detmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can speak for the Disabled Vets Camp. This is a camp on Big Marine Lake. It's for veterans and their families. It dates back to World War I, where it was an overflow for the VA hospital for those suffering from wounds and stuff, had a place to recover and spend time with their families. And this camp has been expanding over the years. The legislature has helped it out financially. And now they want to make some more improvements to the camp because we have so many more young 9/11 families that are coming to the camp with their RVs and camping and tenting and so forth. They run a lot of different programs for veterans families, ice fishing in the winter. So it's a great retreat for our veterans. And I'm sure that the Bliss camp and also the other camp, Chair Ecklund does the same thing for their veterans and the family. So I think it's money well spent, and it supports what the Department of Veterans Affairs is doing too. In fact, we even had the department out there, Larry Shellito, who was the commissioner and the adjutant general at the time. Prior to that, he brought the National Guard engineer unit out there and actually built some of the handicap accessible cabins for those veterans. And it was the best 2-week annual training that these soldiers had, they said, because they actually trained in the things that they would have to do in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's a great camp for our veterans and their families. Thank you.
Representative Poston.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I missed this or not, but I'd like a roll call on this, please.
All right, thank you, Representative Poston. We'll go to Representative Berg next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just maybe just need a recap of the numbers, maybe from Ben Johnson from the department. So essentially, Representative Bliss's proposal is that we take $300,000 from the homeless veterans part of, or from combating the homeless veterans part of the bill, which is 6 million. So just taking that small portion out of that area to fund this particular initiative. Is that math correct?
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, thank you.
Yeah, Chair Zhang, Representative, that's my understanding of the oral amendment. Yes, it would be a reduction to the requested change item to fund our housing vouchers for veterans and former service members at the amount that Representative Detmer and Representative Poston are speaking about. So a reduction to our ask and would be then an additional, basically then turned around and funding the Camp Bliss and Veterans Rest Camp at Big Marine. Helen, Ms. Roberts, please give me an assist.
Mr. Chair and members, if I, can you hear me okay?
Oh, Ms. Roberts?
Mr. Chair and members, if I understand the amendment correctly, in the first year, there would be a reduction of, or an amount of 253,000, then 75,000 in the second year. So that's a total of 328,000. Over the 2 years, that would be used for the 3 veterans camps and then the funding taken from the homelessness initiative. So the homeless initiative would be reduced in the first year to 2,912,000 and in the second year to 3,090,000.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Representative McDonald. Sorry. We were still Representative Berg. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Is there, maybe Ms. Roberts, is there a way that you, could you maybe address like how, like, is there a downside to that? Like how much would extracting that portion out for Representative Detmer and Bliss's ask from the overall number of the homeless project? I mean, essentially, like, I don't care about the posturing. I don't care about if you're mad at the majority leader. If I don't care about the reasons behind this, if we are taking care of our veterans, even shifting the money around a little bit in order to do so in different ways, like, I'm all in. I just want to understand, right, like, as we're doing this shift, what are the repercussions for each program?
Thank you, Representative Berg.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ecklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is obviously getting contentious. I'm going to call a 10-minute recess. Well, let's make it a 12-minute recess. Ms. Roberts can find the numbers that Representative Berg asked for. And for DFL members, Mr. Reese has set up a Microsoft Office link that we can talk about this quickly. So I request a recess until 9:45, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you should say you should just confirm and say we're in recess.
Okay, we are in recess, members.